You know what's funny? People think marriage is about love and trust, but really it's just business. And I was always better at business than Tyler ever realized. I'm Michaela, 35, and let me tell you something. I've been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. My story starts 20 years ago at some charity fundraiser downtown. I was 25, fresh in real estate, hungry as hell, and Tyler was just this guy in logistics, making his little 40 grand a year, thinking he was hot shit because he could afford a decent suit. He wasn't bad looking back then. I'll give him that. Had this confidence about him, like he actually believed he was going somewhere. Sweet. Made me feel like I was the only woman in the room when we talked. But even then, I could see his ceiling, middle management written all over him. Still, he was stable, and I needed stable while I built my empire. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. Nothing fancy. Took me to some restaurant I'd been to a dozen times with clients who dropped more on wine than he spent on the whole evening. But I said yes because Tyler fit the image I needed. Reliable husband, nice enough guy, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about my work. The early years were fine. We bought our first house together. Well, I bought it. Tyler contributed what he could, but I handled the real negotiations, the real money. He was making maybe 75 grand by then, proud as a peacock about his little raises and annual reviews. Meanwhile, I was telling him I made around 98,000, just enough to seem successful without making him feel completely inadequate. But here's what Tyler never understood. I wasn't just selling houses to suburban families looking for their white picket fence dreams. I was working with developers, investors, people who moved real money, and that's how I met Dylan. Dylan was everything Tyler wasn't. Sharp suits that actually fit. Confidence that came from real power, not just middle management delusions. He owned half the commercial properties downtown and was always looking for the next big development. When he walked into my office that first time, asking about waterfront properties, I knew this was my ticket to the big leagues. Tyler would come home talking about his day like it mattered, some supply chain issue he solved, some meeting he ran. I'd nod and smile, playing the supportive wife, but inside I was thinking about the commission I'd just earned. That was more than his monthly salary. He'd get excited about saving enough for a vacation to Florida, and I'd bite my tongue because I'd just closed a deal that could pay for a month in Europe. The thing is, Tyler never asked the right questions. When I started working later, he just accepted that real estate was demanding. When I opened separate business accounts, he trusted that it was for tax purposes. When I started dressing better, spending more on clothes and cars, he actually seemed proud that his wife was doing so well. But Dylan saw the real me. He appreciated ambition. When I told him about a property investment opportunity, he didn't worry about the risk. He saw the potential. When I suggested we partner on a few deals, he didn't hesitate. And when those partnerships started making serious money, he understood that success requires sacrifice. Tyler, on the other hand, wanted me home for dinner every night. He'd sulk when I had to work weekends, like he didn't understand that million-dollar deals don't happen during business hours. He'd make these little comments about how we never spent time together anymore, how I seemed distracted. It was exhausting, having to constantly reassure someone who couldn't see the bigger picture. The money started flowing faster than I'd ever imagined. Dylan and I weren't just flipping properties. We were creating developments, working with offshore investors, building something real. I had accounts Tyler didn't know about, investments that were generating more in a month than he made in a year. But I kept feeding him the same story, modest salary, small commissions, just doing well enough to contribute my share. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Tell him I was making millions while he was celebrating his cost of living raise? He would have either wanted me to slow down or expected me to carry more of our expenses. Either way, it would have complicated everything. Dylan understood the game. He knew that sometimes you have to keep certain aspects of your business private, even from family. He never questioned why I kept our partnerships quiet, or why I preferred to meet at his office rather than bring him around Tyler. He respected that I had a life to maintain, an image to protect. And look, it's not like I wasn't a good wife. I kept our house beautiful. I showed up to Tyler's work events. I played the part perfectly. When his friends would joke about how lucky he was to have such a successful wife, I'd laugh and deflect, making it seem like we were just a normal couple doing well for ourselves. But the truth was getting harder to hide. Tyler started noticing things. how I'd flip my phone face down when texts came in, how I'd take calls in the other room, how I'd come home from client meetings looking like I'd been somewhere expensive. He'd ask innocent questions that felt like interrogations. Where was this meeting? Who was the client? Why so late? I started getting defensive because, frankly, it was insulting. Here I was, building something incredible, and he was treating me like I was sneaking around. So yeah, I got sharp with him. When he'd ask about my day, I'd tell him he wouldn't understand the complexities of high-end real estate. When he'd question my schedule, I'd remind him that successful people don't work 9 to 5. The thing that really got to me was how small his world was. He'd get excited about some process improvement at work, some team-building exercise, some conference he attended. Meanwhile, I was negotiating deals with international investors, managing properties worth more than his entire annual salary, building relationships with people who actually mattered. Dylan and I started spending more time together outside of business. It was inevitable. Really, when you're working on deals worth millions, when you're both operating at that level, you develop a connection. We'd celebrate successful closings with expensive dinners. We'd travel to look at potential properties. We'd spend long evenings planning our next moves. It wasn't planned what happened between us. But when you're with someone who truly understands your ambition, who matches your energy, who doesn't make you feel guilty for being successful, well, things develop naturally. Tyler was so oblivious. He'd be watching TV in his pajamas while I was getting ready for what he thought was another client dinner. He'd kiss me goodbye and tell me not to work too hard, completely clueless that I was about to spend the evening with someone who actually appreciated what I was building. The physical relationship with Dylan felt different from anything I'd had with Tyler. It wasn't just the excitement of the affair. It was being with someone who was my equal, someone who didn't need me to explain why I worked late or why I cared so much about closing deals, someone who understood that power and success were aphrodisiacs. Meanwhile, Tyler was getting more clingy, more needy. He'd want to plan date nights when I had important meetings. He'd suggest we take vacations to places that would interfere with my business travel. He'd talk about how we should be more open with each other, share more about our days, our dreams, our finances. That last part always made me laugh. Tyler's idea of financial planning was his little retirement account, and maybe paying off the mortgage early. He had no concept of real wealth building, no understanding of how money actually worked when you were operating at my level. I started keeping more secrets because it was easier than explaining. When Dylan and I bought a property together, I didn't mention it. When we opened joint investment accounts, Tyler didn't need to know. When I got pregnant, well, that was a complication I handled quickly and quietly. Neither man needed to be burdened with that situation. Tyler kept pushing for more transparency, more togetherness, more of everything I didn't have time to give him. He'd complain that I was always on my phone, always distracted, always somewhere else mentally. He wanted the version of me that existed 20 years ago, the woman who was impressed by his $40,000 salary and thought dinner at chain restaurants was romantic. But I'd evolved. I'd grown into someone who belonged in boardrooms, who could negotiate with millionaires, who understood how real money worked. Tyler was still the same guy, just older and more demanding of my attention. The night everything changed, I'd been careless. I left my laptop open on the kitchen counter after a long day of back-and-forth emails with Dylan about a new development project. Tyler walked by at the wrong moment, saw the wrong message, and suddenly 20 years of careful management fell apart. He confronted me with this look I'd never seen before, not angry, not hurt, just cold. Started asking questions about Dylan, about the emails, about money I'd never mentioned. I tried to explain that it was business, that he was misunderstanding what he'd seen, but Tyler wasn't buying it. For the first time in our marriage, he wasn't backing down when I got defensive. He wasn't apologizing for questioning me. He just kept pushing, kept demanding answers I wasn't ready to give. I was furious. 20 years of marriage, and he was treating me like a criminal because of some business emails. I told him he was being paranoid, that he was sabotaging my career with his jealousy, that successful people like me had to maintain certain professional relationships. He wouldn't understand. But Tyler had changed. This wasn't the accommodating husband who usually dropped things when I got upset. He was asking for bank statements, demanding to see my business accounts, wanting explanations for money he'd never seen. That's when I knew I had to protect myself. Tyler was clearly planning something, and I couldn't let 20 years of careful planning be destroyed by his sudden attack of suspicion. I called Dylan, explained the situation, asked for advice on handling a spouse who was threatening my business interests. But Dylan surprised me. Instead of offering support, he started talking about keeping distance, protecting his own investments, not getting pulled into domestic drama. For the first time, I realized that the man I'd been building an empire with was more concerned about his reputation than standing by me. The man I'd risked my marriage for was already calculating how to cut ties if things got messy. But it was too late for damage control. A week later, Tyler had me served with divorce papers. Not just any divorce papers, ones that demanded full financial disclosure, that froze certain accounts, that treated me like I was some kind of criminal. I was blindsided. This was the same man who used to apologize when I snapped at him for asking too many questions. The same man who'd never challenged me on anything significant in 20 years. Suddenly he had lawyers, strategies, demands. My first instinct was to fix it. I tried explaining that we could work through this, that he was overreacting, that destroying our marriage over a misunderstanding was insane. I even offered to be more transparent going forward, to include him more in my business decisions. But Tyler was done listening. He'd gone completely no contact except through lawyers, wouldn't answer my calls, wouldn't respond to texts, wouldn't even look at me when I tried to approach him directly. The discovery process was a nightmare. My lawyers tried to protect my privacy, but Tyler's legal team was relentless. They wanted every bank statement, every investment record, every business partnership agreement. They were treating my success like it was evidence of wrongdoing. That's when the full scope of my wealth came out. The millions I'd earned through commissions and investments with Dylan. The offshore accounts. The shell companies. The properties Tyler had never known about. 20 years of financial independence. And they were presenting it like I was some kind of fraud. The worst part was watching Dylan distance himself as the legal scrutiny intensified. He started claiming our business relationship was purely professional, that he barely knew me personally, that he couldn't be responsible for how I'd handled my marriage. In court, Tyler's lawyers painted me as a liar and a cheat. They made it sound like I'd stolen money that somehow belonged to him, like my success was built on deception rather than hard work and smart investments. I tried to defend myself, to explain that I'd built something incredible, that I'd been protecting both of us by managing the finances responsibly. But the judge seemed to buy Tyler's victim narrative completely. When they awarded him $1 million of my money, I couldn't believe it. This was the same man who'd contributed maybe a tenth of what I had to our marriage, who'd never taken a real financial risk in his life, who'd been content with mediocrity while I built an empire. But Tyler got his revenge. He walked away with enough money to start over, while I lost not just the settlement, but my partnership with Dylan, my reputation in the industry, and most of our mutual friends who somehow saw me as the villain in this situation. 2 years later, I'm still dealing with the fallout. My business has never recovered from the scandal. Clients don't trust someone who hid millions from her own husband. Dylan moved on to other partnerships, other investments, other women who don't come with legal complications. Tyler, meanwhile, has apparently thrived. I hear through mutual acquaintances that he's invested his settlement wisely, that he's happier than he's been in years, that he's even started dating someone new, some woman who probably thinks his middle management job is impressive. And me? I'm still here in our old house, still working in real estate, but at a fraction of my former success, still bitter about how everything fell apart. Because the truth is, I did nothing wrong. I built something incredible. I was an ambitious woman in a world that punishes female success, and I got destroyed by a man who couldn't handle being married to someone more successful than him. Sure, maybe I should have been more transparent about the money. Maybe I should have included Tyler more in my business decisions. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved with Dylan. But none of that justifies what Tyler did to me. How he destroyed 20 years of marriage and nearly ruined my career because his ego couldn't handle the truth about who I really was. The system is rigged against women like me. We're supposed to be successful, but not too successful. Ambitious, but not threatening. Independent, but still deferential to our husband's feelings. Tyler couldn't handle being married to a woman who out-earned him by millions. So he found a way to punish me for it. I've learned that you can't trust anyone completely, not even the people closest to you. Tyler spent 20 years pretending to support my career, then turned around and used my success against me the moment it suited him. Dylan spent years building a partnership with me, then abandoned me. The second things got complicated. But I'm not broken. I'm not destroyed. I'm still here, still working, still building something new from the ashes of what they tried to take from me. And someday, when I'm back on top, they'll both realize what they lost when they decided to bet against me. The truth is, I was too good for both of them. Tyler with his small dreams and smaller courage. Dylan with his fair-weather loyalty and calculated friendships. I deserved better than men who couldn't appreciate what they had when they had it. So yeah, I lost $1 million in a 20-year marriage, but I kept my dignity, my ambition, and my refusal to apologize for being exactly who I was meant to be. And in the end, that's worth more than anything they could have taken from me.